and Schramm.
So, got a press release here, and I would venture to say it contains a sentence that you don't usually find with the words that are descriptive in it. And I'm just going to read this to you. Washington, D.C. Last night, the U.S. House of Representatives passed Congressman Jim McDermott's measure with bipartisan support. Now, I've read a lot of news releases in my day, and I've read a lot from Jim McDermott's office. I can't remember the last time I read something that said Jim McDermott's measure was passed with bipartisan support. Congressman Jim McDermott joins me here on Newsline PM. How are you, Jim?
Ken, it's so nice to hear that you're starting to read my press releases.
I've always read them. I just don't always pay attention.
You don't pay attention because you don't believe them, right?
No, I always believe them. Hey, congratulations. And the measure that I'm talking about is providing some funding to deal with a very serious issue, and that is the suicide prevention of all the soldiers and troops that are, by one each day killing themselves.
Well, Ken, it started out, I saw this article, and I've known about it for quite some time. So when the bill came along, I thought, here's a place we can stick the money in for getting the suicide prevention more effective. So I wrote my amendment, and lo and behold, there was an amendment written by a guy from Iowa by the name of Leonard Boswell. Leonard was a major in the Army and flew helicopters. He flew about 100 missions through all that stuff, and so he and I have been longtime friends. Well, I went to him and I said, hey, Leonard, let's put it in together instead of two amendments. Let's just make one. And we got up on the floor and talked about it, and the chairman of the the chairman for the Appropriations Committee said, I agree with the amendment, I support it, and let's adopt it. And that was how it all happened. I mean, it was... Bill Young is he and his wife have spent a lot of time up at what was then the Army Hospital here in town, and is now melded with Bethesda, the Navy Hospital. And Walter Reed was closed, but he and his wife used to go up there regularly to work with the veterans. And so he has, when you find something where both sides care about it, you can get through a bipartisan thing these days. I've done it several times. This was not the first time, but this was certainly a real pleasure yesterday to Leonard and I to wind up with the chairman standing up and say, I'm not going to fight it, I endorse it.
Do we have any idea at all, Jim, as to what the causation of this is? I mean, we've had past wars, we've had Vietnam, we've had other conflicts, we had Iraq, and it just seems as if that this is so eruptive in respect to the sheer number of veterans who are killing themselves. Is it based on the curtailment of access that they have to psychological treatment, or what is it exactly that you've been able to put your finger on here?
Well, I think one of our problems, Ken, is that we really need to look at all the factors involved. The Vietnam War, for instance, you served 1 year and you left, and you went home, and you were out of it. If you got through your year alive, you could go on with your life. In this war, we've had people being sent back 5 and 6 and 7 times over and over again, spending very little time at home with their family, with their kids, with their husband or wife. And so you've had a lot of separation in families. So very often, when a guy or a woman comes home, it's very hard to fit back into the social situation that they knew when they went off to Iraq or Afghanistan. And that, I think, has contributed some to it. The other part is that this war has been fought largely by volunteers and by people who feel like the rest of the country isn't quite sure if they exist. I mean, most people don't think about the war very much because most of us don't know anybody there. and because of the way our volunteer army is put together. So there are a lot of factors which I think lead to the isolation and the hopelessness that lead people. The average of the age of these kids is 25 to 22 or something like that, and so you're talking about young people who suddenly lose all hope that anybody will ever understand them or that they'll be able to fit back into the society. It is pretty awful to feel that helpless and that hopeless when you're that young.
Wow, and one of the things that was absolutely staggering to me, I got to tell you, contained within your news release, was you say that more military personnel have died by suicide since the war in Afghanistan began than have died fighting there.
That's correct.
That is just that is frightfully staggering.
Well, it's clearly. From my standpoint, having been a psychiatrist in the Vietnam War, and know what people go through, to me it's not surprising on one hand, but on another hand, it is really stunning when you look at the numbers. This whole thing, I get letters from people all the time where this has happened, and you realize that. You would some of these cases you would say to yourself, gee, they got so much going for them, and people wanted to help them and all the rest, but some way or other they slipped through the cracks, and that's really what we're trying to figure out. One of the problems, as I said in the release, was the whole problem of stigma. If you get this on your record, then the question is, can you get a clearance to be, a top secret employee, or can you get a promotion? If you've had a mental breakdown or any kind of problems with it require you to go see a mental health person, does that mean you're not going to be able to go up for the next rank? And so there are all kinds of issues that we have to deal with besides simply keeping these kids alive until we can figure out how to help them. What is the sort of environment in which they're living? And the military has got its rules and it's got its ways, and you can't just march in and say, we got to change all that. But you do have to sit down and talk about it. There's a great guy in Seattle by the name of Pete Corelli. Pete Corelli was the vice chief of staff of the Army and lives in Seattle now and is running an organization called One Brain. And he is an extraordinary military man who's done an awful lot of thinking about the changes, and he told me, I met with him a week or so ago, and he said, Jim, after all the time I spent the 4 years as vice chief, and I studied it hard, I come away with so many questions, I'm not sure I still know the answers. So I think all of us are still kind of groping to figure out what's the best way to help these kids.
And I think the media's responsibility, I think we've been lax in respect to keeping a lot of this information, on a back burner somewhere with apparently more important news to present on a daily basis. I think that we have failed to perhaps drive home to the public how significant this issue really is. Real quickly, before we run out of time, what will the money that will be provided, where will that go, and how will it benefit the troops?
Well, we didn't specify that. We really wanted them to have the money so that they could be creative in try new ways to help people. We have hired, one of the problems is finding qualified professionals who want to come into the military and deal with this disease, this problem. And so we got a real problem with that, and some of it may go into training at the U.S. Armed Forces Medical College, or we wanted to put the money aside so that people could then begin to think creatively. There's some money. Now, how can we use it most effectively to help these kids?
I think it's awesome. Congressman Jim McDermott, thank you, and thank you for your time today, and thanks for the bipartisan support you were able to garner on this bill.
Every once in a while, a good idea will drive both sides together.
I love it. Good talking with you.
See ya. Bye-bye.
All right, hang with us.